So I'm working now in product management, and that is I work with dealers. More than half my time is just interfacing with dealers, talking with dealers, and developing a deep understanding of the problems and challenges that we go through on a day-to-day basis. And it's changing. You know, I can think back to 3, 4, 5 years ago, and the world was a different place in many ways, right? And so it's more important than ever to master some of these different parts of the business, and master the customer relationship. It's never been easier for customers to go somewhere else and find a product online, at for a couple percent less. How can we make sure that doesn't happen? And so we're going to explore a number of different areas related to customer loyalty. We may not equate feedback to loyalty. We may think feedback equals, you know, customer, maybe upset customer. Well, that's part of it. But feedback is primarily not pertaining to the negative experiences. So looking at all this stuff. So you probably heard metrics quoted by marketers and consultants over the years. New customers cost you 8 to 10 times more than repeat customers, and I've heard numbers, anywhere between 0 and 10 times, and I think they're all of these stem from, or many of these at least stem from. There's a Harvard Business Review paper on this, and so you can Google it and find it. It's available online. And so 8 to 10 times more. Let's say let's go with that range. Is that really true? I mean, it makes sense that it costs money to get customers. If I spend 10,000 bucks in Google Ads in a month, I might get 500 leads, and only 100 of those leads actually turn into deals, right? We get a lead, we get some leads in, they don't answer the phone. We didn't have what they wanted in stock, and they needed it now. But let's say 100 of those, 20% of those actually bought. Well, that $10,000 divided by those 100 customers means those 100 customers cost me 100 bucks a piece. That's my customer acquisition cost. So there is a cost, and that's a direct cost. But then there's the time we spent emailing, texting, calling all 500, hopefully, or at least as many of those as our team could get to. If they came into the store, whomever spoke with them did the product demos, wrote up quotes, maybe ran them for financing. Some of them had a 380 credit score, so that didn't qualify. We can't really track all that labor cost. We just know it's a thing. But the reality is, those customers that have bought from you, once they have done so, they know what it's like to do business with you. And so they don't have to wonder, are these folks trustworthy? Are they friendly? Are they going to try to take me? Are they, is this place I want to come back to? People think about all of these things, not necessarily in that order and not necessarily so consciously. These things run through the customer's mind, and we get that. That's at a pretty high level. What we want to figure out is, how do we get from there to they're a customer for life? And that's the holy grail. What can we do to make sure they come back? Because we can always throw more money at Google. I mean, we can always get more customers. But see, if I have to spend $100 in marketing spend plus X amount of dollars in labor, let's say it was $20, $30 in labor, that's probably a low number with some of these customers. I mean, this is not like Chick-fil-A where they're in and out in 50 seconds. People come out, especially if they're looking at spending $20, $30, $40,000 on a tractor or a piece of construction equipment, or a side-by-side UTV or something, or they're buying 2 or 3 mowers, or depending on their scenario. I mean, that's, people just don't tend to make these decisions on a dime. They want to take their time. The more they spend, the more time they expect to make that decision, oftentimes. So a lot of cost associated with working with customers and establishing that initial rapport. And it may even take place over multiple on-site visits. So how do we make sure we don't have to keep spending that with customers? And the key is capitalize on these customers that are already that like us. They know what it's like to do business with us, that trust us. So the customer experience. What causes them to come back? The experience, the expertise of your staff, the fact that you have the right stuff in stock, which is pretty dang hard right now, okay? It's probably maybe never been harder, or at least in the last few decades probably hasn't been harder. And so having the right stuff in stock is a factor. The good news is, if there's good news in that, everybody is having these issues. So most customers get that. They drive by their car dealer and, there's not a lot of stuff there, or it's not, 50 Ford trucks all in a line at the Ford dealership. There's a handful, and then there's a whole bunch of pre-owned of other brands, or some pre-owned Fords. People are starting to see that. They're seeing signs at the grocery store and that kind of thing. So some customers are pretty forgiving with that, but that is a factor. The friendliness of the team, some of these other aspects of the customer experience can make up for some of the things that are beyond our control. We can control if we're friendly and our team is dressed professionally and the place is clean and we call people back and fulfill promises and that kind of thing. There's a number of factors that go into that. Customer experience is paramount when it comes to making sure that customers come back. And so if we wanted to manage that, if we wanted to peek into the customer experience, we need to either be there where all the transactions are happening, which for an owner or a general manager of any sizable store, that's pretty much impossible. You just can't be in more than one place at one time. So you either have to be there and be a part of the transaction, be a fly on the wall, or we need to measure it in some sort of way using a tool. Some dealers look at reviews to get an idea of what customers think about them, to hear the voice of the customer. And Google, after all, is a place where we can get an idea of what customers think. And I would say, for the most part, most dealers have got at least a decent rating, as in more customers seem to like them than dislike them. And yet there are some dealers who have a ton of reviews on there. And so those dealers appear to be really liked by their customers. But I'm here to tell you that reviews are a piece of it, but it's way downstream from where you really should be measuring the customer experience. And I would say that for most dealers, 99+% of their customers are not going here to Google to voice their feedback, good or bad, even the happy ones. Restaurants, it's a different story, but our industry, you have to make it so convenient for the customer, and there are ways to do that. We'll talk about it, actually, even because that's part of this process. Some dealers, they've not managed their online reputation even for so long that they've become a little jaded about it. And people put a negative review up there. It probably, it wasn't true. I'm not even sure that person ever bought from me. I couldn't find their name in my system, all that stuff. So I wouldn't start with reviews if I'm wanting to listen to the voice of the customer. I would start upstream in the transaction from that. I'm talking about post-sale, post-service surveys. And no, I'm not talking about those things. Everybody's gotten these surveys before that are the worst, that you click into them and it's clear that this thing is going to take at least 20 minutes of my time. Nobody likes those. No, I'm talking about something that takes less than 1 minute to complete. If we make it really easy for the customer to do it, and they can not take more than maybe 30 seconds to just give me a little insight into what that experience was like. They're not all going to do it. I would love to tell you they all would, but enough of these customers will that it can give you an idea as to how well you're doing and how loyal your customers are. But there's another factor here. The voice of the customer is more than just a rating. Ideally, a rating and a comment, if they'll leave one. Not everybody will, but most of the time, customers, if given the opportunity, if you give them a place to optionally give you a glimpse into, they can comment and say good or bad, so and so went way out of their way to help me, or so and so was kind of curt with me, or whatever. And people post all kinds of stuff in these things. I've read a lot of surveys. Some people will complain about the labor rate or the time it took to fix something. But more often than not, when I see complaints, it's typically because somebody didn't communicate well. They didn't manage expectations. They didn't return phone calls. They didn't get an authorization to fix something that was fixed. I see this stuff all the time. And in my dealership, sometimes we just screwed up and we were just trying to get stuff fixed and out the door, and we forgot we're in the business of taking care of these customers, not just fixing stuff. So the feedback is critical, and it's critical to look at it by department. You could be absolutely killing it on the sales side, taking great care of people, but over on the other end of the building, proverbially, where you got parts and service, it may be that the bedside manner is not so good, or I've seen the reverse. So it's difficult to be consistent across all departments, and it's even more difficult when you have multiple stores. So those who've attended my webinars before, I probably dropped this quote in just about all of them because it's so good. Peter Drucker said something to the tune of, if you measure it, you can manage it. And boy, is that true. We can measure the customer experience, and thus we can manage it. You can put a number to it, you can set goals on it, you can reward bonus employees on it. There's no reason not to do it. At the end of the day, if you listen to the voice of the customer and you read or listen to that feedback, and it affirms everything that you believe or already knew, you've just validated assumptions. But more often than not, the feedback's full of surprises. Sometimes good, sometimes not. But it's always the right thing to listen to the customer, even if the customer feedback, and it's not all useful, right? Someone complains about your labor rate. Okay, I'm probably not going to change my labor rate because one person thought I charged too much. Now, if my sales dropped off a cliff and I talk to customers and most of them are saying something about my labor rate, then maybe I'd consider that. But how often does that happen, right? So at any rate. So how do we get customer feedback? If we want to get a rating and a comment from the customer, I'm a huge fan of the Net Promoter methodology. There's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. Net Promoter's open source. Companies all over the world use it. A lot of our OEMs are starting to use this, though typically they're going off of warranty registration information. They don't always give us access to all the information, and we may not even be privy to all of it unless the customer gives us less than 8 out of 10, and then we're going to hear from our rep or somebody at the company. And those programs have their place, but it makes a world of a difference when you own the process. You can decide how long these surveys are, and let's be honest, I've looked at a lot of OEM surveys. We had plenty of them in my dealership, and they were typically long. They didn't get the best quality feedback. They may have had somebody at a company calling the customer who didn't know and the survey companies typically don't know the first thing about tractors or whatever the equipment is, and so you kind of have to take whatever is written down there with a couple grains of salt or translate it, because you could just tell they didn't know a lot about it. Anyway, those programs leave something they're just lacking. And so having control over the process to make sure it's the most convenient for the customer, the most timely, is key. And so we're going to take a quick look at the Net Promoter system. I'm a huge fan of it. I think it can be really, really helpful in your business. And so it goes something like this. You ask the customer, Would you recommend us to others? Would you recommend us to a friend or colleague? This is usually worded a couple different ways. And um, the scale is a 0 to 10 instead of 1 to 5. And there's a big psychological difference between 0 and 1 and 6 and 7 and some of these. We'll talk about that. But the methodology, what it's measuring is more than just were they happy, but would they recommend us? I mean, that's the direct language. So the idea is if they give us a low rating, it's not just like 1 or 2 or 0, it's 0 to 6 or 7 to 8 or 9 to 10. And the 9 to 10, these are the people that on the scale, they're highly likely or very likely to recommend us to others. We want a lot of those. And for most dealers, most of your customers will give you a 9 or 10. Yes, even in parts and service, even during a pandemic when there's crazy supply stuff. I could jump into any one of my dealer accounts and take a look at the surveys and see that. So there are always detractors. They're typically 5% or less of the customers. And the passives are the ones good but not great. And there's a lot of value, especially listening to what the passives have to say, because sometimes it was something as simple as we just stopped giving out spare keys by accident, or we're not giving people their manuals or whatever. Detractors, it could be anywhere from, people just gave a 0 because they were ticked off and they weren't like really planning to, discourage customers from doing business with you. But oftentimes that is in fact the case. If they give you that low rating, it's not just they had a bad experience, they're not planning to come back and they're going to discourage people from coming out there. And so it's worth reaching out to these customers and just see if they can be rescued. They're not all worth rescuing, but many of them are. And sometimes you'd be surprised who gave you a rating like that. They may not be a confrontational person. So some ways that you can get some feedback, there's old-fashioned ways. Ask customers to fill out a comment card at the dealership. Call them. Call them after, randomly call customers after they've done service or they've bought parts or have bought whole goods. Typically, if we're calling them, we're not going to call somebody who spent $5 with us. We're going to call somebody who spent, $5,000 or $10,000, just because there's only so many hours in the day. Those are viable ways to do it. I'll just say I don't know many dealers that do either of those super consistently. Post-sale and service text surveys. Huge fan of this. I'm a little biased. I helped develop a program that does just that automatically because we do thousands of transactions at even small dealerships, big dealerships, and at multiple locations to try to do some kind of a feedback thing at scale. Very difficult to do if it's not automatic. And I'm always a fan of offering incentives, doing a drawing or something like that to get customers to leave feedback. But I want to expound on this post-sale, post-service surveys and by text message. I think that's really, really key. So we want to create repeat customers. So we need to get from feedback to loyalty. We want a loyal customer base. It's the holy grail. And so we need to have a process for getting that customer feedback and see what patterns are we seeing. Are particular employees named repeatedly and in a positive or negative light? We learn a lot of training opportunities. If someone is named a lot positively, we go, how do we get others to do what they're doing? And vice versa, right? We find out where the breakdowns are. So this net promoter score, I'm going to go a little bit more into this, and then we'll get a little more into how we can get more of this feedback. The net promoter system gives you the score, and it's called net because we do a little bit of math, but it's not complicated. This is a percentage. The percentage of customers who gave us a 9 or 10 out of 10 minus the percentage who gave us 0 to 6. So this is a really common number that I see something in the in the 80s. I see some that are in the 90s. It's not always the case that it's that way across all departments, but sometimes I've known some dealers that just do an extraordinary job of watching this. And When you first start measuring it, it's just not going to be as high as after you've been managing it for a while, because it's one of those things, if you're not measuring it, how can you manage it, right? So the net of your promoters minus your detractors. So 87 out of 100 customers are referring us to others, are being commission-free salespeople, which means they're coming back. Okay, people don't recommend places they would never go to. So that's huge. That is absolutely huge. You can do this with Target CRM. There are not many programs out there that do this. Target CRM is a CRM that that my team designed for a lot of different types of customer relationship management. One of those is gathering feedback and getting reviews, and doing it automatically. Because if we have to remember to do it and we're adding work to people's day, it's pretty unlikely that it's going to be done consistently. It's not scalable if it's manual in many cases. I've seen this happen with so many different things. And so what Target CRM does is it automatically sends a text message after the customer makes a purchase. And it's whether that's a whole good, tractor, mower, whatever, whether that's parts, whether that's service, it differentiates between them. And that rating goes to its respective department. No exporting reports, no buttons to push, it's automatic. And then of the customers who complete a survey, only the happy customers are referred to Google to do what they say they're going to do, which is recommend you to others. So we expect them to do that when they're talking with the in-laws and cousins and friends and neighbors. But we also want to make it really easy for them to do that on the internet, which will send us lots of new business for free. We love that. So you can master the customer experience. It can be done. Target CRM is a really great tool that can do that, and we can get into more depth at any time about that. We've got a team that can demonstrate that for you. But it starts owning the customer experience, driving that repeat business starts with measuring and listening. And so if you want to learn more about that, reach out to your account manager. We can talk about how you can do that with Target CRM. So let's talk about this gathering feedback. I want to show you a couple of glimpses about how Target can do that. So you text the customer, and it does that automatically. So they're going to see, and this is a little screen grab from the phone. They'll see, they click the link and they go into the survey. Would you recommend this to others? If they give a low rating, we do, typically we have these set up where we ask for a comment from them, let them vent, because this does not go anywhere but in your system. And then it says, thank you for the feedback. Manager will reach out as soon as possible, or ever how you word it. This can be customized. Conversely, let's say they left a positive rating. You can optionally ask for a comment. Typically, these customers are not going to leave as much feedback as those who had a bone to pick with you. And we've got dealers. I use an example here, P&P Small Engines. They were one of our original beta testers. They now have got, like 250 reviews. They've just been raking them in. And this screen grab is from this year. So they've been growing really, really fast with their reviews. They've really focused on the customer experience. It shows in the reviews, but there's a lot more of these customers. Not everybody leaves a review, but a lot more of them will leave feedback because they don't have to log into anything. And these guys have been really owning the customer experience for a while now, and it really shows. One dealer here, ATS Outdoors, they left this testimonial for us not too long ago. I guess it's been a few months back. They said, we love Target CRM, and thanks to it, we now have a ton of positive reviews online, almost 30 of them, I think. And so they talk about their experience. They almost they've nearly doubled their reviews at one of their locations, and another one of them is like 50-60% up from when they first started using Target. So just that was getting reviews. They've been focusing on deterring the one-star reviews, listening to the customer feedback, and so we really, really appreciate ATS Outdoors. They've done a good job of owning the customer experience and helping us to make Target CRM a better app as well. Questions. I know we're a little bit short on time, but we can definitely take questions if you have any. I've got a couple. One is it's like how are surveys sent? We've had some folks ask if we send surveys by email before. We actually don't focus on email yet with Target CRM. And the reason is that over 95% of the time, we don't have an email address on the customer record. Now, the dealers that are really good at gathering emails are really good at it, but that's not most dealers. And what we found is that the average email is not opened for at least an hour and a half. And that's an average. There are people that just, emails go in the spam filter, they don't ever open them, that kind of thing. Text, on the other hand, we have phone numbers the vast majority of the time, because we're kind of a phone-based kind of business. That's kind of where we've been forever. And they're going to see that in 90 seconds. And basically, everyone is going to see the text. Now, that doesn't guarantee you they're going to click on it and engage with it, but many of them will, enough that you can get enough feedback to learn from and to work your business. Another one, another question, can I make a custom survey with multiple questions? Yeah, you can, with this survey builder, you can put as many questions in there. I would just caution, keep it as simple and short as possible. You want to get volume of feedback. So I would ask just enough to give you the information that you're after. It's a good question. Any others? Let me check a couple other places that some of these questions may in fact be. Okay. Well, it looks like we're out of time. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm happy to answer questions even outside of the webinar. We can take as much time and go into more depth. Some of these subjects really could be split out into a webinar of their own, the Net Promoter System being one of those. Hope you found it useful. I hope you're listening to the voice of the customer, and thanks for taking the time.